Okay? At some point I decided this was somewhat about three kind of themes: leakage, linkage, and lifetime. And there are three things, all right? If we're concerned about unwanted dissemination of private information to third parties, requires that I argue that the presence of three conditions. Somehow there must be leakage of information. What are our interests? What about our profile? There must be a way of linking these various pieces of information together. So can Google go ahead and link together what they learn on one first-party site I go to with what I do on another first-party site? Just to pick on Google. And that information needs to persist over time and have a duration, a non-trivial duration. If that information immediately went away, we wouldn't have a problem. Okay? So my contention at the bottom here is that if we can eliminate any one of these three, if we could prevent information from being linked together, then we would very much reduce privacy loss. Okay? So I'll kind of finish up here and kind of go through and look at these three. Okay, and I'm going to go through them in kind of reverse order. So what if we could get rid of data lifetime? What if we could really say we can control how long a piece of information about us was known and was really out there? There was just recently an article somewhat along this lines there in the Communications, the ACM, that had a nice quote that ephemeral messages are incredibly freeing and make people communicate more authentically and freely with their friends. So imagine you can send a text message, or you can send an email message. Okay, and that message had, that text had a lifetime. And it would go away, and you know that it could never be used again. Okay? What you might be willing to send might be very different than what you send out. Certainly Snapchat is out there. You can send a picture to a friend, and that friend can only see it for 3 to 10 seconds. It's exactly that same kind of idea. Okay? That picture has a limited lifetime. Okay? People have said we can make data private or make it visible for a certain period of time by encoding it, and then we have a set of keys that are maintained at a trusted server, and after a certain amount of time, that key goes away, and so you won't be able to get out the data again. Okay? The problem is, there's things like caching, there's things like local snapshots, even Snapchat. Okay? Does that data really go away, or does the Snapchat application just make sure that it doesn't get shown? Is the data still available? Okay? If we're going to use some trusted third party, other server, then we need to trust that server in order to do it. Okay? So I don't think any of this is overly wonderful or likely to be present anytime soon. What about linkage? Okay? Lots of these sites use tracking cookies. They assign to your browser a unique cookie that gets tracked. Okay? A lot of these sites do that. Most of these sites do that. Browser fingerprinting. Your browser has unique characteristics. The set of fonts it has, the set of add-ons that you put in it, the versions of those, that it can create a very unique browser fingerprint. In fact, there's an upcoming paper that showed real companies really doing this. Your IP address is fairly unique. We all have a number of globally unique identifiers. An email address, a username, a social networking identifier, my Facebook ID. I have the same Facebook ID on my iPhone as I do in the machine in my office, as I do in the machine at home, as I do on my laptop. Anybody in a position to see that Facebook identifier fly says, this is all the same person. Globally unique identifiers. There was a front page article in the New York Times a week ago Sunday talking about a local, I think local out here, Drawbridge. Wait, no, I hadn't heard of them. Anybody hear of Drawbridge? Basically, doing this very same thing of figuring out through things like this and some statistical analysis, being able to say, hey, this person on this iPhone is the same person on this computer in this office. Okay? There was an article in USA Today recently, in the last few weeks, had an article on, at least the Wall Street Journal I saw, I had picked this up, something called the Ad ID. Basically, they're going to put a unique identifier in your browser, or in Chrome. Okay? And they're going to say, we're going to go ahead and give out that unique identifier to those third parties that are good. Okay? It's exactly like a unique identifier on your phone. iPhone, Android devices have basically a unique identifier that gets handed out. It's like a permanent cookie, a permanent tracking cookie. Okay? So if you're going to control linkage, you basically have to control all of these, which I think is also increasingly difficult. So in fact, this whole notion of tracking cookies, they're still going to exist, but I think increasingly companies are less worried and are finding ways around them. And they are simply just now another kind of unique identifier that they can go ahead and use. Okay, so that brings us back to leakage. So one question is, Paul and I have published a number of studies that say, hey, look at all this leakage. So one question is, leakage still happening? So as I put these slides together, I went back and I said, well, let's look at some of these places. This is virtually identical to a slide at the top that I showed earlier. So yes, Pandora still leaks information, except our user has gotten a year older. He was 32, now he's 33. Okay? So Pandora still leaks information to DoubleClick. ARP, they've got to be good, right? American Association of Retired Persons. It turns out that they store some interesting information about users in their cookies, and you say, well, what's going on here? This is just a request to metrics.arp.org. You do a DNS lookup, it turns out that metrics.arp.org is actually belongs to Omniture, and is a server, Omniture being a prime analytics company. Okay? So what about things that I might find about my habits? Okay? So I live out near Boston. I go to my travel site, I go to Expedia to make airline reservations to come out here and give this talk. So I came in yesterday, I'm going to go home tomorrow. So I come in on 10/16, I go home on 10/18. I go from Boston and I go to SFO. Okay? So what happens? I watch what goes through. Well, here we have information that's going to Blue Kite at SFO, Boston, 2013, 10/16, 2013, 10/18. And oh, by the way, this is actually a refer header. This actually had already come through DoubleClick. And if I didn't have enough room on the slide, Castle Media, Scorecard Research, Ad Techus, Ad NXS, and PointRoll also saw this information flow through. Okay? Now you can say, and people have said, well, this doesn't really count. Look, this is just in the refer header. Okay, it just gets leaked through by accident. Okay, just the way the web works. Okay, because when you go and something, if there's an image on a page, the URL of that page gets leaked through as a refer header. Okay, and you can say, this is just happening by accident. In fact, I've seen people, and in fact, I recently reviewed a paper that said this is just unintentional leakage. Is it unintentional, or is it kind of by convenience that it happens to stay there? And oh, by the way, all of these third parties that are getting this information, they're in a position to link this with everything else they know about. Okay? I go to WebMD and I look up that I am interested in pancreatic cancer. We don't know for what reason. That gets leaked through in a similar way to Scorecard Research, which I think was number 3 on my list that I showed right at the top. Okay, so what can we do about leakage? Unfortunately, the people that are in best position to prevent it are not doing a good job, and that's the first-party sites themselves. If Expedia wanted to, they could prevent that information from going through about my travel arrangements. There are ad blockers out there. Anybody use ad blockers? You. Okay. Do you know what they're doing? No. I think that's part of the problem. Okay, you get this very one-size-fits-all. It was actually interesting. There was a company called PageFair. Anybody ever hear of PageFair? I had not. PageFair reported that people are ad blocking at a rate of 23%. I thought, wow, that's a lot. Turns out that PageFair's business model, though, is to give you software to help sites educate visitors. So a bigger number is better to their bottom line. Okay, so I don't know how much to believe that. Okay, last site, so where do we go? So we have this tension between users wanting to protect information and aggregators wanting to collect it. Certainly first-party site or third-party site argue, look, users like ads. They pay for content. Okay? We give them more relevant ads. Unfortunately, first-party sites are in the best position to prevent leakage, and they don't seem to be doing a very good job of it. Users can do some things. Unfortunately, I don't think, sometimes either users don't know what they're doing, or by using some of these things, we get things done with pages that, pages break or they don't work quite right. I think one of the things that we need to look at is helping users, you and I, have a better idea in terms of semantic solutions, in terms of not just ad blockers and things like that, have a very syntactic. Here's a regular expression. If this matches, go ahead and block this. Okay, without having a real idea of, well, what is that third party doing, or what is this set of third parties doing? Okay, and the bottom line, if you don't want some information known, okay, don't put it out there, because once that information is out there and you give information to a site, you really don't know right now where it's going. Okay, back to where I started. Questions? Any more questions?
Well,
yes, sir.
Well, they connect it up, forcing you to give them their information if you want to have their services, their quote free services. What do you do with that?
Well, so then I think that's a legitimate question. So they're forcing you to give this information to use their free services. So on one hand, what that may lead to is there becomes then I think a legitimate response by first-party sites that you say block their ads. They may say, we refuse to serve you content unless you see ads. And on one hand, I think that's a fair response on their part. And then you as a user have to say, is the value I'm getting out of that site, am I willing to do that? The problem that I have now is everything is implicit. Users are not making explicit decisions about what to do. Decisions are being made for users, not by users. Okay? If users want to do that, if you decide, I want to see that content, I'm willing to see the ads. The problem is, though, it's not just seeing the ads on that page. Again, as I say, that information's being linked together, so that can be combined with other things, that you do a week from now. That's also the kind of problem. If you knew that that information was only known on that page, and this goes back to this lifetime argument, you might be perfectly happy that they used that and that you gave that info to them. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.